20 years of silence. You don't wake up one morning and realize your children have forgotten you. It happens slowly, quietly, like a house settling after winter, cracks forming behind the walls long before the plaster splits. I didn't notice the first crack. The year my daughter Jennifer stopped visiting on weekends, I told myself she was busy, newly married, adjusting to her new life. The year my son Christopher missed Christmas, I convinced myself the roads were icy and he had young children to care for. Denial is not blindness, it's self-preservation. But eventually, the excuses thin out and the truth walks right through the front door. Mine arrived in the form of a phone that never rang. My name was Margaret Ross. For 20 years, I started every morning with the same ritual. I would boil water, pour it over cheap instant coffee, sit by the window, and check my phone for notifications. I already knew would not be there. Every morning, the same blank screen. Every morning, the same tiny ache in my chest. My husband died 23 years ago. Since then, I've lived alone in a small one-bedroom apartment. Not because I enjoy solitude, but because solitude is the only thing that did not leave me. The walls of that apartment were covered in photographs. Jennifer at 8, wearing her pink graduation dress. Christopher at 11, holding a baseball glove bigger than his face. The three of us at the Jersey Shore, pretending we weren't freezing as the waves splashed around our ankles. Photographs can be cruel. They freeze a moment of happiness and hold it hostage forever. They remind you of what was, what should have been, and what never came to pass. Every morning I looked at those photos and asked myself the same question. When did I stop being their mother? Was it after my husband died, and the grief made me quiet and tired? Was it when Jennifer married wealthy and decided that the woman who scrubbed floors to pay for her private school no longer fit the aesthetic of her new life? Was it when Christopher became a lawyer and learned that emotions don't bill by the hour? Or was it gradual, like water dripping on stone until the erosion becomes permanent? I'll never know. But I do know this. My children forgot me on purpose. It wasn't an accident, it wasn't neglect. It was a choice. For 2 decades I sent gifts. Expensive ones I could barely afford. A $250 cashmere shawl for Jennifer's birthday last year. A $300 Mont Blanc pen for Christopher 6 months ago. Toys, clothes, books for grandchildren I had never met. I always photographed the gifts before mailing them. Proof that I tried. Proof for who? I'm not sure. Maybe for the universe. Maybe for the part of me that still hoped for redemption. But nothing ever came back. No thank you. No confirmation. Not even a cold email. Silence. Always silence. Sometimes I would dial their numbers just to hear their voices on the automated voicemail greeting. Hi, this is Jennifer. Leave a message. I left hundreds. Christopher here. You know what to do. I did know. I just didn't know why he never responded. I'd say things like, Happy birthday, sweetheart. I miss you so much. I love you, son. Just checking in. Are you okay? Call me when you can. He never could. Or he never wanted to. On my 69th birthday, I walked through the park alone. Women my age were surrounded by grandchildren, laughing, wiping ice cream from sticky fingers, reminding tiny humans to stay where they could be seen. My grandchildren did not know my name. They did not know I existed. And the reason was simple. Their parents made sure of it. Jennifer blocked me on social media years ago. Christopher's wife blocked me even earlier. Imagine learning about the birth of your grandchild through a stranger's Facebook post. Imagine being so thoroughly discarded that you only learn of your family's milestones accidentally. I lived that for 20 years. Then, one Wednesday, everything changed. I found an envelope in my mailbox. Thick, ivory, gold lettering. For a moment, My breath caught. For 20 years, I had opened mailboxes expecting bills, junk mail, the occasional flyer from the supermarket. But this was an invitation. Jennifer's 45th birthday party, formal dress code, 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., her mansion in the suburbs. No handwritten note. No, I miss you, Mom. No, I hope you can come. Just a formal invitation, the kind you send to acquaintances, not family. But when you've been starving for love for 20 years, even crumbs feel like a feast. Hope, that dangerous, treacherous emotion, flickered inside me. Maybe she remembered me, maybe she wanted me back. Maybe this was the start of something healing. I spent 3 days preparing, bought a $200 wine-colored dress, bought a $600 silver flatware set engraved with her initials, spent more money than I should from a pension too small to stretch. But it didn't matter. My daughter had invited me. Even if the invitation was cold, it was something. And something, after 20 years of nothing, felt like salvation. On Saturday, I took a taxi to her mansion, a sprawling monument to wealth funded by her businessman husband. The kind of home where everything is polished, curated, rehearsed. The kind of home where a mother like me becomes an eyesore. The moment the door opened, I felt it. A shift in the air. A tension. A reason I had been invited. And it wasn't love. But I didn't know that yet. Hope makes fools of us all. So I walked inside and stepped into the beginning of the end. If you're still listening, and any part of this feels uncomfortably familiar, stay with me. This isn't just a story about being forgotten. It's about what happens when a woman my age finally decides she's done begging for love. You're listening to Echo Lens Stories. If you want more truths families don't dare say out loud, don't forget to subscribe and keep this tab open. The rest of my story is where everything changes. The housekeeper led me through a long hallway decorated with art pieces, so modern they looked more like geometry assignments than paintings. Everything smelled of lemon polish and money. Old money, inherited money, the kind of money people like me only ever clean around. As we approached the backyard, the noise grew louder. Laughter, clinking glasses, a jazz quartet playing a polished version of Fly Me to the Moon. I stepped outside and froze. It wasn't a birthday party, it was an event. Caterers, champagne fountains, white linen tables arranged in a perfect horseshoe, heat lamps glowing gold against a carefully landscaped garden. I felt suddenly, painfully underdressed. My $200 dress, the one I'd spent an entire month saving for, now looked like something purchased from the clearance rack of a forgotten department store. The gift in my purse felt cheap. My presence felt like a mistake, but I kept walking. That's what mothers do. We show up even when we aren't wanted. I spotted Jennifer across the garden. She looked stunning. Her champagne-colored gown hugged her waist in a way that only tailored clothing does. Her hair, sleek and polished, caught the light every time she turned. She laughed with a group of friends, women who looked like they'd been cut from the same luxurious cloth. When she finally noticed me, her smile flickered. Just for half a second. Just long enough to reveal the truth behind her eyes. Then she plastered on a perfect socialite expression, the one she saves for charity galas and press photos. Mom, she said, approaching me with air kisses that never touched my skin. You made it. I wanted to hug her. I wanted to feel her arms around me the way I used to feel them when she was little. But she stepped back before I even moved forward. This is my mother, Margaret, she told her friends. Her mother, not mom, not mama, not even my mom, just Margaret. A formality, a label, not a relationship. The women nodded politely. Their smiles tightened when they saw my bargain-priced dress. Not one of them asked me a single question. Jennifer excused herself within seconds. Mom, There are a lot of people here. Make yourself comfortable, okay? I'll come back later." She didn't. She drifted back into her world, a world where I was nothing more than an old photograph at the bottom of a drawer. I found a small table in the farthest corner of the garden. No one sat near me. No one approached me. If I had turned into a statue right then and there, no one would have noticed. A server passed by and offered champagne. I took the glass, not because I wanted it, but because it gave my hands something to do. They were trembling. I didn't know if it was age or nerves or the sudden realization that this invitation was not the miracle I had hoped for. As I sipped the champagne, bitter despite its expense, I watched other families. Mothers surrounded by children, grandmothers hugged tightly by grandchildren, generations laughing together, sharing memories, and me? I sat alone, watching the life I believed I deserved happen to everyone but me. Then I saw him, Christopher, my son, 42 years old, tall, handsome, wearing a suit tailored so well it looked like it cost more than my pension. He walked in surrounded by friends and colleagues, laughing loudly, confidently, the picture of a successful man with a full life. For a moment, he looked my way. Our eyes met. Just for a second. A second that cracked something inside me more violently than 20 years of silence ever had. Because he saw me. And then he looked away. He didn't nod. He didn't smile. He didn't acknowledge me at all. He simply dismissed me. As if I were not a person, as if I were not his mother, as if I were no one. My fingers tightened around the champagne glass. That cold, hollow rage, the one I had felt only faintly before, began to throb in the center of my chest. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was quiet, controlled, sharp, the kind of rage that comes from clarity. He didn't forget me, he wasn't too busy, he didn't lose contact accidentally. He chose to erase me. And seeing him there, confident, arrogant, utterly unaffected by my presence, made that truth undeniable. As I sat there drowning in memories, a server placed a plate of canapes in front of me. Tiny works of culinary art, smoked salmon roses, mini tartlets with gold flakes, caviar on wafer-thin crackers. Food that cost more per bite than my entire weekly grocery budget. I stared at the plate, at the luxury, at the obscene abundance of it all. And for the first time in years, I felt embarrassed. Not because I was poor, not because I lived a simple life, but because I had spent 20 years begging for crumbs of affection from people who lived like royalty. People who let me starve for love while they feasted on their own self-importance. The years of humiliation came flooding back. Jennifer refusing to let me inside her home after her first child was born. Christopher marrying without even telling me. Gifts I had mailed with trembling hands, never knowing if they were opened or thrown away. Every painful memory resurfaced, sharp as glass. That's when I realized I didn't lose my children. They discarded me. I had been replaced long ago by their lifestyle, by their pride, by their desire to erase the parts of their past that didn't shine enough for their curated lives. A woman sitting at a nearby table glanced at me and whispered something to her friend. They both looked away quickly, as if embarrassed to be caught staring at the outsider. My cheeks grew warm. I wasn't supposed to be here. This world wasn't built for me. I wasn't elegant enough, wealthy enough, shiny enough, but I had been invited, and not by accident. A feeling crawled up my spine. Something was wrong, very wrong. I didn't know why I was here, but it wasn't love, it wasn't forgiveness, and it certainly wasn't family. No, the reason would reveal itself soon enough. And when it did, it would break the remaining pieces of my heart, one last, final time, before I built a new one from scratch. The sun had dipped lower by the time I noticed movement near the small stage at the center of the garden. A man in a crisp suit approached it with the kind of quiet authority that only comes from wealth or believing you deserve it. Robert, my son-in-law, Jennifer's prize, her golden ticket, the man whose last name she carried with pride, as if shedding the one she was born with, made her more refined. He tapped his champagne glass with a spoon. The sharp, crystalline sound cut through the music, slicing through the air like a blade. Conversation stopped. Laughter died down. All heads turned toward him, mine included. Jennifer moved gracefully to his side on the stage, glowing in the soft evening lights. Christopher followed, stepping up beside them like the final piece of a perfect family portrait. A portrait I was not part of. My heart thumped once, hard, warning me, preparing me. Something was coming. "Good evening, everyone," Robert began, his voice smooth, trained, practiced. "Thank you all for joining us to celebrate my wonderful wife's birthday." Polite applause followed, light, elegant, controlled. Jennifer smiled like a woman who had everything. I sat in my lonely corner, holding a champagne flute I hadn't touched since the first bitter sip, my lips pressed together so tightly they had gone numb. Robert continued, "I want to take a moment to acknowledge not just my wife, but our entire family. Tonight marks the beginning of a new chapter for us." A murmur of interest rippled through the crowd. My spine straightened. Why did I feel dread? Why did my palms go cold? Because mothers know, even when they've been discarded, we still know. "We're excited to announce," Robert said, pausing theatrically, "that our family has purchased a beautiful coastal property, a perfect spot for a beach house, a place where we can build lasting memories for generations to come." Applause erupted. I felt nothing, absolutely nothing. Not pride, not excitement, just the hollow echo of being left out. Again. I hadn't known anything about this purchase. But why would I? I was a ghost in my own family. Christopher stepped forward, taking the microphone. "As the family attorney," he said, slipping into his professional tone, "I've already handled the legal side of the acquisition. And let me tell you, this house isn't just an investment. It's a legacy, something our children and grandchildren will inherit one day." Legacy, a word meant to bind generations together. A word my children only remembered when there was money attached. The crowd clapped again, charmed by their unity, their vision. Then Jennifer took the microphone, and that was when everything snapped into focus. "And to make this truly special," she said, scanning the garden with searching eyes, "we want every family member to take part in this investment, including my mother." Her gaze locked onto mine. My breath stopped. A chill shot through me so violently that, for a moment, I thought my heart had skipped a beat. She smiled. Wide, performative, rehearsed. "Mom," she called out, "why don't you come up here with us?" 50 pairs of eyes turned toward me, a spotlight without mercy. My chair suddenly felt too small, the ground too far away. My pulse hammered in my ears. This was not an invitation. This was a summons. I stood, somehow. I walked, somehow. Each step felt like wading through wet cement. By the time I reached the stage, my legs trembled so badly I thought I would collapse. Jennifer slipped an arm around my shoulders, gentle enough to appear affectionate, firm enough to hold me in place. "Everyone," she said sweetly, "this is my mother. After so many years, she's finally here with us." A soft "oh" rippled through the crowd, but beneath her smile, there was nothing warm, nothing soft, just calculation. Robert stepped forward again, addressing me now. "As I was saying, Margaret, we want this house to be a family investment, a project we can all contribute to." The word contribute hung in the air like a guillotine. Christopher added, We know Dad left you that house, the one you sold years ago, and we thought it would be meaningful for you to put some of that money toward the beach house." My blood ran cold. How did they know about the sale? How did they know how much money I had left? How did they know anything about my finances? Christopher held up a folder, thick, tabbed, and ready. "We've already prepared the documents. We just need your signature and the transfer." He said it like this was a business meeting, not a mother's humiliation. Jennifer squeezed my shoulder. "Mom, just think about it. It would guarantee your place in the family home. You could visit any time, spend time with the grandchildren. Isn't that what you've always wanted?" The cruelty of those words nearly knocked the air out of me. A place in the family that never called, never visited, never allowed me into their lives. A place in a house they never intended me to live in, only to help pay for? This wasn't love. This wasn't reconciliation. It was strategy, cold, calculated, financial. They had invited me here because they wanted my money, not my presence, not my history, not my heart, just my money. The crowd watched, expecting a sweet moment, a touching agreement. But something inside me broke cleanly in that moment. Not the kind of break that leaves you shattered, the kind that sets you free. My voice came out steady. "I need to think about it." Jennifer's smile faltered. Just a crack, barely visible. "There's nothing to think about, Mom," she said through her teeth. "We need the commitment this week." This week, of course, pressure, urgency, cornering me where I couldn't escape. "No," I said, not loud, not dramatic, just final. A single syllable that silenced half the garden. "No," I repeated, "I'm not signing anything." Robert's smile wavered. Christopher's jaw tightened. Jennifer's fingers dug into my shoulder before she quickly released me. "Mom," she whispered harshly, "don't do this here." I looked at her, really looked, at the woman I had raised, loved, sacrificed for, begged for, a stranger. "I'm leaving," I said quietly, and before any of them could stop me, I stepped down from the stage, walked across the garden, walked past the guests, walked past the laughter and the champagne and the perfect party, walked past 2 decades of hope and heartbreak, walked straight toward the woman I was about to become, a woman done begging, done waiting, done hurting, a woman ready to disappear. I didn't look back as I left the stage, not at Jennifer's frozen smile, not at Christopher's clenched jaw, not at Robert whispering urgent instructions to someone nearby. Let them stare, let them whisper, let them wonder how their plan had slipped through their fingers. For 20 years, I had stood in the shadows of their lives. Tonight, I stepped out of them. The heel of my shoe clicked against the stone tiles as I crossed the garden. An old woman leaving a party she never should have been invited to. The soft golden lights blurred around the edges of my vision, not from emotion, but from something colder. The realization that this was the last time my children would ever see the version of me they thought they knew. I gripped my purse tighter. Inside, it was the gift I had bought Jennifer. Sterling silver flatware engraved with her initials. $600 worth of hope, a hope she never deserved. I walked through the house, now strangely silent to my ears. The laughter, the jazz music, the murmur of guests. It all sounded distant, as if I had already left, even before stepping outside, and in a way, I had. I reached the front door just as someone caught up behind me. A hand clamped onto my arm. Not gentle, not affectionate, firm, controlling. Christopher. "Mom," he hissed, pulling me to face him. "What the hell was that?" His voice was low, urgent, coated with the arrogance of a man who has always gotten his way. I tugged my arm free. "Don't touch me." He blinked, surprised. For once, I wasn't the trembling, desperate mother begging for scraps of affection. I was something else, something unfamiliar to him, a woman with nothing left to lose. Mom, he repeated, now sounding more like a scolding employer than a son. You can't just walk out. We weren't finished talking. We were, I replied. You don't understand the opportunity. I cut him off. I understand perfectly. He stiffened. You invited me after 20 years of silence, I said with a controlled calm I didn't know I had. Not because you missed me, not because you wanted me back. You wanted my money. His jaw twitched, a tell. You're being dramatic, he snapped. It's an investment, a family investment. You'd benefit too. Family! The word tasted poisonous. You're not my family, I said. The truth rolled out with terrifying ease. You made that clear a long time ago. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. If you walk away from this, don't expect us to include you in anything ever again. Don't expect holidays. Don't expect calls. Don't expect... I laughed, a small, quiet, devastating laugh. Christopher, I said softly, you haven't included me in anything for 20 years. He opened his mouth to argue. I placed a hand on his chest, not lovingly, but to steady myself as I delivered the final blow. And you know what? I survived. I stepped back, straightened my shoulders, and turned toward the door. Goodbye, Christopher. He didn't follow me this time. He just stood there, breathing hard, as if he'd just watched something slip out of his grasp. Because he had. Outside, the night air was cool against my flushed cheeks. The mansion behind me glowed warm and brilliant, but the light no longer touched me. A taxi rolled up moments after I called it. I sank into the back seat, finally exhaling. As the car pulled away, I watched the mansion become small in the rear window, a glittering palace of people who would never understand the simplest truth. You can't abandon someone for 20 years and expect them to stay waiting at the door. I didn't cry, not anymore. I had cried all my tears years ago. Tonight was for clarity. And clarity is a colder, sharper thing than sadness. By the time the taxi reached my building, it was close to midnight. The driver helped me out with surprising gentleness. You have a good night, ma'am, he said. I will, I replied. The surprising part was, I meant it. I walked up the stairs to my apartment, opened the door, and stepped inside. The silence greeted me like an old companion. For the first time, it didn't feel heavy. It felt expectant. I hung my purse on the hook, then removed the gift box and placed it on the kitchen table. Sterling silver flatware, engraved with initials that meant nothing to me now. Without ceremony, I opened the trash bin and dropped the box inside. It hit the bottom with a dull, definitive thud. Then I went to my bedroom, took off the wine-colored dress, and hung it carefully in my closet. I knew I would never wear it again. The night was quiet, the kind of quiet that comes before a major shift in a person's life. I made tea and sat at the kitchen table. And for the first time in 20 years, I felt awake, not hopeful, not heartbroken. Awake. There is a particular moment in a woman's life, especially a woman my age, when she realizes she has survived everything she thought would break her. Tonight was that moment. I took out a notebook from the drawer, a simple spiral-bound one, cheap, bought from the dollar store years ago. On the first blank page I wrote, how to disappear then. Under it, change my name, sell the apartment, close all accounts, open new ones somewhere else, cancel my phone number, delete all social media, rewrite my will, move somewhere new, leave no forwarding address. I tapped my pen against the page. There was one more thing to write, the final step, the most important one. Never look back. I sat there staring at the list, letting its weight sink into me. This wasn't an impulsive reaction. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't bitterness. This was survival. My children had erased me from their lives slowly, methodically, deliberately. Tonight I finished the job for them. Only I would do it cleanly, legally, permanently. No more waiting for calls that never came. No more gifts sent into the void. No more humiliation at their polished, expensive doorstep. I was done. I closed the notebook, blew out the candle, and stood. Tomorrow I would begin disappearing. Tonight I allowed myself one final luxury: sleeping peacefully. Because the moment I walked out of Jennifer's birthday party, a chapter of my life ended, and another one, sharp, cold, and entirely mine, began. Morning light always tells the truth. It seeps into the corners of a room, into the creases on your face, into the places you've ignored for too long. When I woke up the next day, after the worst, and strangely the most liberating night of my life, the truth sat in my chest like a calm stone. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I wasn't heartbroken. I was done. That word felt heavy and steady, the kind of word you place at the end of a book, not the middle. The kettle whistled as I made my morning tea. My hands didn't shake. For the first time in years, my fingers didn't tremble at the thought of checking my phone, because I already knew there'd be nothing, and because now I didn't care. My tea brewed, steam rising in soft ribbons, and I sat at the kitchen table. The notebook lay in front of me, still open to the page titled, How to Disappear. I reread my list without hesitation, without fear, without the desperate hope that maybe I was making a mistake. I wasn't. This wasn't a woman acting out of emotion. This was a woman reclaiming her life. One item on the list stood out. The first domino that would set everything else in motion. Change my name. I traced the words slowly. Changing your name might sound drastic to people who have always been seen, heard, cared for, but to someone who has been invisible for 20 years, it's just a formality. A symbolic cutting of the last string that tethered me to a family that had long abandoned me. I had already spent a lifetime being the woman my children didn't want. Now I would become the woman I wanted. By 9 a.m., I was dressed, slacks, blouse, cardigan. Not glamorous, not elegant, but dignified. The clothing of a woman who knows exactly what she is doing. I took the bus downtown. The ride was quiet, filled with strangers who didn't know me, didn't look at me twice, didn't carry the memories of who I had been before last night. In anonymity, there's freedom. My first stop was an attorney's office, a small firm with clean windows and a brass plaque out front. Sarah Parker, Esquia. I had chosen her late the night before after scrolling through dozens of names online. She was older, experienced, something about her photo radiating a no-nonsense energy. Exactly what I needed. When I entered, Sarah greeted me with professional warmth. How can I help you today? I sat down, folded my hands, met her eyes. I need to change my name, I said. She didn't ask why. She didn't gasp. She didn't judge. Good. Instead, she nodded. Let's get started. Just like that, a spark of power lit behind my ribs. A small flame at first, then bigger. For 20 years, my children dictated the rhythm of my life. Now, with a single sentence, I reclaimed the beat. Sarah walked me through the process. It would take months. It would require paperwork, court publication, statements. I didn't care. I would wait. I had already waited 20 years for something far more impossible, my children to love me again. When she handed me the forms, I didn't hesitate. I filled them out quickly, neatly, Margaret Ross fading onto paper like the ghost they had turned me into. When Sarah asked, "What new name would you like to use?" I said it without a tremor. Selena Owens. A name that belonged to no one in my past. A name they couldn't trace. A name that felt clean, strong, sharp. She typed it into her system and printed it out. Seeing the words on official documents made it real. I wasn't Margaret anymore, not to them, not to the world, not even to myself. As I signed, a strange sensation washed over me. Not grief, not loss, but relief, like stepping out of a dress that had never fit after wearing it for too many years. The next stop was the bank. I asked to speak to the manager. He walked me into a glass office overlooking the lobby. "How can we assist you today, Ms. Ross?" he asked politely. "That name," I said, "won't be mine much longer." He blinked, unsure how to respond. "I want to close all my accounts," I continued, "and withdraw everything." "All everything?" He wasn't prepared for that. "Yes," I said, "every cent." People underestimate older women. They assume we are fragile, confused, easily swayed. But when you've survived what I've survived, humiliation, abandonment, erasure, you become something else, unshakable. The manager cleared his throat, then began processing my request. 20 minutes later, I walked out with cashier's checks totaling $215,000. Every dollar I'd saved, scraped together, cherished. Money my children had hoped to drain from me with a smile and a champagne toast. Not anymore. I took another bus across town to a different bank, one far enough away that no one would recognize me, no one would connect me to my past. I opened brand new accounts under Margaret's name for now, with the full intention of converting them to Selena Owens the moment the court approved it. The teller handed me my new debit cards, new accounts, new life. By late afternoon, I returned home. The apartment felt smaller, but not in a sad way, more like a suitcase waiting to be packed. A temporary stop, not a home. It wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to the woman who had waited for 20 years. And I wasn't her now. I sat at the kitchen table, opened the notebook, and checked off 3 items. Change my name, close accounts, open new accounts. Each check mark brought a lightness I hadn't felt since my husband was alive. For the first time in decades, I wasn't reacting to what my children did. I was acting for myself. And God. It felt powerful. 2 days later, I listed my apartment for sale. Within a week, offers poured in. People love the charm of a small, manageable unit in a safe neighborhood. And I didn't care about squeezing every dollar out of the sale. I cared about speed. Freedom thrives in momentum. I accepted an offer of $180,000, signed the paperwork, and packed my life into boxes. I donated half my belongings, shredded old documents, and sorted through the photographs that once felt like treasure. Photographs are strange things. They freeze our hopes in ink and paper. I held each picture, Jennifer's toothless smile, Christopher's scraped knees, birthday candles, and sunlit vacations. And I let myself feel every truth. I loved them, I raised them, I gave them everything, and they gave me nothing in return. I didn't throw the photos away, but I didn't display them again either. I put them in a single box, taped it shut, and labeled it only past, not family, not memories, past, because that was what they were now, what they had chosen to become. When moving day came, I signed the final documents, took one last look at the apartment, and walked out without nostalgia. I wasn't leaving my home, I was leaving my prison. I boarded a bus to a coastal town 4 hours away. A quiet place, peaceful, unremarkable, perfect. No one knew me there. No one would know me until I let them. As the bus drove along the coastline, waves crashing rhythmically against the shore, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not for reconciliation. Not for forgiveness. Not for children who would never change. Hope for myself. For the life I was finally choosing. When I reached the little coastal condo I had rented, cheap, small, with an ocean view, I opened the windows and let the sea air fill the space. I whispered to the empty room, This is mine now. My life, my time, my story. For the first time in decades, my first morning in the coastal town felt unreal, like I'd walked into someone else's life by mistake. The air tasted different here, clean, salty, alive. For 20 years, my days began with disappointment, with the cold glow of a phone that never lit up with messages from my children. But here, in this little one-bedroom condo with peeling paint and mismatched tiles, I woke up to something I hadn't felt in decades: possibility. I made coffee and stood at the window, staring at the ocean. The waves rolled in and out, steady and eternal, with none of the cruelty of human relationships. They didn't ignore you. They didn't forget you. They didn't use you. They simply existed. I realized then that I had built my entire adult life around people who treated love like a luxury, something to grant only when convenient. But the ocean didn't demand anything of me. It didn't need me to be younger, richer, more stylish, less emotional. It didn't punish me for aging. It didn't abandon me when something shinier came along. It was enough to stand there and breathe. After breakfast, I unpacked slowly. At my age, moving is less about logistics and more about shedding. Every object you decide to keep becomes a question. Does this belong in the life I'm building, or only in the life I survived? Most things didn't make the cut. Old holiday decorations I'd put up alone each year? Gone. Clothing I saved in case my children invited me somewhere nice? Gone. Letters I wrote but never sent? Gone. The only box I allowed myself to keep unopened was the one labeled Past, full of photographs, the last remnants of a life that once had meaning. But even that box went straight to the darkest corner of a closet. I wasn't ready to burn those memories, but I wasn't ready to carry them either. Not anymore. Around noon, I walked to the attorney's office in town, a different lawyer, local this time. I didn't want even a whisper of connection to my old city. If Christopher ever tried to dig, every link had to be severed. The attorney was a man in his 60s, with a grandfatherly calmness that made me feel steadier than I had any right to be after everything that had happened. "What can I help you with today, Ms. Ross?" he asked. "That name," I said softly, "is temporary." He nodded, waiting. I handed him the paperwork Sarah had filed for my name change. "I'm becoming someone else," I told him, "and I want every part of my legal life to match." We spent 2 hours rewriting my world. New will, new healthcare directives, new emergency contacts, removal of Jennifer and Christopher from every place they were ever listed, transfer of assets under the soon-to-be name, enforcement that no one but me could request access. "This is unusual," he said gently when we finished, severing ties so completely. I met his eyes. "I spent 20 years begging for love from people who threw it away. This isn't unusual, it's overdue." He didn't argue, wise man. The next weeks passed quietly. I walked by the ocean every morning, letting the cold wind sting my cheeks. Sometimes I sat on a bench and just listened to the gulls, the waves, the distant hum of boats. No phone buzzing, no anxiety, no hope that would go unanswered. Just peace. I made acquaintances slowly. The woman downstairs, Betty, baked too much and insisted on sharing. The man next door, Peter, was a retired carpenter who spent his days fixing anything anyone broke. The barista at the corner cafe learned my order by the third day and gave me a free muffin because I reminded him of his aunt. No one asked about my children. No one tiptoed around me. No one judged my wrinkles or my quietness. I existed here, fully, freely, not as a burden, not as an afterthought, not as a forgotten mother, just as a person. It was enough, more than enough. One evening, as I sat on my balcony, a soft knock came at my door. It was a young woman, mid-30s, warm smile, curly hair pulled back. I'd seen her before walking her dog at sunrise. "Hi," she said. "Sorry to bother you. I'm hosting a little dinner for the neighbors this Saturday. I'd love for you to come." A dinner, a real invitation, not a trap, not a demand, not a transaction. Just kindness. I smiled, a true, natural smile I hadn't felt in years. "I'd love to." Her face brightened. "Great. It's casual, so don't worry about dressing up." Casual, not performative, not polished for appearances. Human. When she left, I leaned against the closed door and breathed out slowly. This, this simple thing was what family was supposed to feel like. Not blood, not obligation, not shared DNA. Connection, respect, warmth, presence. I had searched for it in the wrong places for decades. Now, without even trying, it found me. A week later, a letter arrived in the mail. This one wasn't thick, wasn't heavy, wasn't written in desperate strokes of guilt. It was from the court. Name change approved. Selena Owens, effective immediately. I held the document with both hands, staring at the letters like they were sacred. This wasn't escape. It wasn't erasure. It was rebirth. I whispered the name out loud. Selena. The syllables felt clean, soft but certain. A woman who survived storms and learned to love her own company. And so I signed the final signature, the one that officially ended the last chapter of Margaret Ross. When I placed the pen down, I felt something else slip away. Their power. My children would never be able to track me, never manipulate me, never summon me like a pawn in their polished lives. They would try, perhaps. People like them always do, because guilt burns and regret corrodes. But regret isn't my burden anymore. They can carry it themselves. That night, I walked to the beach again. The moon hung low over the water, a silver coin caught between waves and sky. The sand was cold under my feet, but I didn't mind. I whispered into the wind, "Thank you for teaching me what not to accept." It wasn't bitterness. It wasn't sarcasm. It was truth. Pain, abandonment, loneliness. They had been brutal teachers, but they taught me the most precious lesson of all. You cannot force people to love you, but you can choose to love yourself enough to walk away. I stood there a long time until the tide crept closer, brushing my toes like a soft reminder that life keeps moving forward, and I let it carry me with it. 6 months of silence passed, but unlike the 20 years before, this silence wasn't a wound. It was a choice, a boundary, a liberation. I lived quietly in my little coastal condo. I walked the beach every morning, letting the waves polish the rough edges of my life. I planted herbs on my balcony, basil, mint, rosemary, small things that grew simply because I took care of them, not because they demanded anything from me. And I built something I never thought I'd have at my age. A life without longing. Then, one afternoon, as gulls screamed overhead and the breeze carried the scent of salt and sunscreen, my phone rang. My new phone, my new number. A number only 3 people had. My attorney, my doctor, Betty from downstairs. The screen showed an unknown number. A chill slid down my spine. I answered anyway. "Hello?" There was a pause, then a male voice. Formal, professional, not one I recognized. "May I speak to Margaret Ross?" My heart didn't drop. It hardened. "That person no longer exists," I said calmly. "Who is this?" "This is Attorney Daniel Rivers. I represent your son, Christopher Ross." I didn't breathe, but not from panic, from calculation. "What do you want?" I asked, voice steady. "We've been trying to locate you," he said. "Your previous number was disconnected, your residence sold, and your forwarding address is unavailable." Of course it was. "What do you want?" I repeated. "It concerns a sensitive matter regarding your late husband." For a moment, the ocean seemed to quiet outside my window. My husband died 23 years ago, I said. There's nothing left to discuss. The attorney hesitated. Actually, ma'am, a bank account was recently discovered in his name, one with considerable funds. As his surviving spouse, you're entitled to the inheritance, but we require your signature. How much? I asked. Approximately $150,000. 150,000, exactly the amount they wanted from me for the beach house. How convenient. How did you find my number? I asked. Another pause. Your previous attorney provided it under legal obligation. Of course, Sarah wouldn't have betrayed me unless the law forced her to. I exhaled slowly. Well, I said, you may tell my children they can keep the money. The line went silent. Ma'am, he sounded stunned. I don't want it, I said. I don't need it, and I won't sign anything. Don't look for me again. Mrs. Ross, I am not Margaret Ross, I said, voice like steel. That woman is gone. And I hung up. I blocked the number immediately. Then I set the phone down and walked out to the balcony, letting the wind touch my face. I felt nothing. Not fear, not guilt, not sadness. Just power. They had spent months trying to track me down. Not because they missed me, not because they realized the cruelty of their silence. Because they wanted money. And when they couldn't get it, they invented a story about a forgotten bank account. They were predictable, pathetic, and, most importantly, they were too late. A week later, a certified letter arrived. Thick, heavy, official. I opened it carefully. A court summons? I barked out a laugh. Short, sharp, disbelieving. Christopher was suing me. The charge? Abandonment of family responsibilities and failure to fulfill verbal financial agreements. Verbal agreements. The beach house scheme. They were willing to drag me into court to get their hands on money I had earned through 20 years of loneliness and sacrifice. People say love is unconditional. They are wrong. Love has conditions: respect, care, effort, presence. If those are absent, then love dies, long before anyone admits it. I called my attorney, Sarah. She listened, sighed, and said exactly what I already knew. They have no case, but you will have to appear. Fine. I had avoided them for months, but I am not a coward. Let them see what they created. The day of the hearing, I wore a simple gray suit, my hair tied back, my face bare of makeup except for a light powder. I looked like what I was, a woman who had survived. When I stepped into the courtroom, there they were, Jennifer, Christopher, Robert. They turned toward me, confusion first, then shock, then something sour, almost like fear, because I didn't look like the mother they remembered. I looked stronger, sharper, untouchable. Jennifer's eyes filled instantly. Real tears this time, not the rehearsed ones from her birthday. Party. Christopher's jaw tightened. Robert whispered something under his breath. Their attorney stood and extended a stiff nod. Mrs. Ross. It's Ms. Owens, I corrected, stepping forward. Jennifer gasped. The courtroom buzzed. Christopher's expression flickered between confusion and anger. The judge raised his eyebrows. Yes, I said calmly. My name was legally changed months ago. You could hear a pin drop. I sat beside my attorney, back straight, heart steady. This wasn't their mother standing before them. This was the woman they forged with 20 years of silence. The hearing unfolded like a slow, inevitable storm. Jennifer and Christopher testified first, voices shaking, painting me as a cold, distant mother who abandoned them emotionally years ago. They lied, but they believed the lies. That's what ego does. It rewrites memory to avoid accountability. Then my attorney presented the truth. The phone records, hundreds of messages, dozens of gifts, notes sent into the void, attempts to visit, doors closed in my face, birthdays spent alone, grandchildren I had never held. Every piece of evidence was a blade. Jennifer cried harder. Christopher grew furious. But truth is not softened by tears, nor undone by anger. When the judge dismissed the case, with a sharp reprimand neither of them expected, I felt something inside me seal shut, not crack, not break. Seal, final, irreversible, complete. Christopher stood up abruptly, pointing a shaking finger. "You're going to regret this," he spat. "When you're old and sick and need someone, we won't be there." I looked at him gently. "When have you ever been there?" He flinched, like a child being told the truth for the first time. After the hearing, I walked out of the courthouse into bright sunlight. My attorney offered to walk me to the street, but I shook my head. "I'm fine." And I was. More fine than I had been in decades. I reached the sidewalk, closed my eyes, let the sun warm the wrinkles time had etched into my face. And right there, on that busy street outside the courthouse where my children tried to chain me back to a life I had already escaped, I forgave myself. Not them, myself, for waiting so long, for believing so much, for loving too deeply, for hoping too desperately. I carried all that weight for 20 years. And now? I set it down. I opened my eyes, took a breath, and whispered a promise into the wind. I will never go back. And I didn't. Not ever. After the courthouse, I didn't go straight home. Home wasn't a place anymore. It wasn't a city. It wasn't an apartment filled with memories that punished me. Home was the life I was building, one step at a time, one breath at a time. And right then, I needed space, not four walls. So I walked through unfamiliar streets, past cafes with clinking cups, past parks where children screamed with joy, past benches where older couples shared quiet conversations. I watched 100 small, ordinary moments, moments I once envied, moments I once longed for with my own children. But as I walked, I realized something unexpected. I didn't ache anymore. The absence didn't feel like a wound. It felt like healed skin. Tender, yes, but whole. People think the worst pain comes from losing someone. They're wrong. The worst pain comes from chasing someone who doesn't stop to look back. I stopped chasing, and the world didn't end. Instead, it finally began. When I returned to my coastal town, the sky was a soft blue fading into orange. The ocean was loud today, waves slamming the rocks, scattering salt into the wind. It felt right, like the world was echoing everything inside me. I changed out of my courthouse clothes and slipped into something comfortable, a soft blue sweater and loose pants, the kind of clothing you wear when your soul wants ease, not presentation. Then I walked to the beach. My feet sank into the cold sand as the wind whipped my hair. I walked until the hem of my pants got wet, until the sharp ocean spray stung my cheeks, until my lungs felt cleansed. It was time to let go, fully, completely. I picked up a smooth white stone, held it in my hand. The weight of it reminded me of all the years I held on to hope. Hope for change, hope for love, hope for apologies that would never come, hope for family. Hope is useful until it becomes a chain. For 20 years, it chained me. I closed my eyes. "This is everything I waited for," I whispered into the wind. "Everything I wanted, everything I deserved, everything I never received." My fingers tightened around the stone, and I release all of it. I threw the stone as far as my arm allowed. It hit the water with a small splash. Insignificant to anyone else. Monumental to me. I stood there until the cold seeped through my shoes, until the wind numbed my face, until my heart felt lighter. When I finally turned back toward the boardwalk, I wasn't Margaret Ross anymore. I wasn't even the wounded mother who once waited by the phone for calls that never came. I was Selena Owens, a woman with a future, a woman with no shackles, a woman who belonged entirely to herself. The following days were quiet, gentle. Each morning began with coffee and waves. Each afternoon held small routines: grocery shopping, watering my herbs, reading novels I never had time for before. Each evening, the sun dipped into the ocean like a soft curtain call. My neighbors became familiar faces. Betty downstairs knocked often, always with muffins or gossip or both. Peter next door helped me fix my kitchen cabinet one afternoon, then insisted I try his homemade chowder. People here didn't know my past. They didn't see me through the lens of what I should have been to someone else. They simply saw me. That was enough. Better than enough. One evening, as I sat on my balcony, a soft knock came at my door. It was a young woman, mid-30s, warm smile, curly hair pulled back. I'd seen her before, walking her dog at sunrise. "Hi," she said. "Sorry to bother you. I'm hosting a little dinner for the neighbors this Saturday. I'd love for you to come." A dinner. A real invitation. Not a trap. Not a demand. Not a transaction. Just kindness. I smiled. A true natural smile I hadn't felt in years. "I'd love to." Her face brightened. "Great. It's casual, so don't worry about dressing up." Casual, not performative, not polished for appearances. Human. When she left, I leaned against the closed door and breathed out slowly. This, this simple thing, was what family was supposed to feel like. Not blood, not obligation, not shared DNA, connection, respect, warmth, presence. I had searched for it in the wrong places for decades. Now, without even trying, it found me. A week later, a letter arrived in the mail. This one wasn't thick, wasn't heavy, wasn't written in desperate strokes of guilt. It was from the court. Name change approved. Selena Owens. Effective immediately. I held the document with both hands, staring at the letters like they were sacred. This wasn't escape. It wasn't erasure. It was rebirth. I whispered the name out loud, Selena. The syllables felt clean, soft, but certain. A woman who survived storms and learned to love her own company. And so I signed the final signature, the one that officially ended the last chapter of Margaret Ross. When I placed the pen down, I felt something else slip away. Their power. My children would never be able to track me, never manipulate me, never summon me like a pawn in their polished lives. They would try, perhaps. People like them always do, because guilt burns and regret corrodes. But regret isn't my burden anymore. They can carry it themselves. That night I walked to the beach again. The moon hung low over the water, a silver coin caught between waves and sky. The sand was cold under my feet, but I didn't mind. I whispered into the wind, "Thank you for teaching me what not to accept." It wasn't bitterness, it wasn't sarcasm, it was truth, pain, abandonment, loneliness. They had been brutal teachers, but they taught me the most precious lesson of all. You cannot force people to love you, but you can choose to love yourself enough to walk away. I stood there a long time until the tide crept closer, brushing my toes like a soft reminder that life keeps moving forward. And I let it carry me with it. Over the next months, my life blossomed in unexpected ways. I started volunteering at the library, shelving books, reading to children, helping older residents navigate technology. People started greeting me by name, my new name, with genuine affection. I baked cookies for neighbors. I attended community events. I learned everyone's dog's names before I learned most of the humans. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't forgotten. I wasn't abandoned. I was here, alive, present, seen. Imagine that, At 72 years old, finally seen. One evening, after a long walk along the pier, I sat on a bench overlooking the water. The sky was streaked with orange and lavender. A child's laughter echoed somewhere behind me. I realized something. My story didn't end when I walked away from my children. It began. Not the life they imagined for me, not the life I begged them to share, a life I chose, a life where peace wasn't dependent on anyone's attention, a life where love wasn't something I chased, a life where I belonged to myself. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Farewell, Margaret," and then, "Welcome home, Selena." The waves rolled in softly as if answering back, and for the first time in my entire life, I believed I was finally allowed to be happy. If my story felt like a mirror to a wound you never talk about, don't walk away from it. Stay with Echo Lens Stories. There are so many lives like mine that families bury in silence. Subscribe, keep listening, and don't let women like me stay invisible.